What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 422. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott-Vargas. Luis, how you feeling, man?
Pretty good. I got sick again. This particular flu season hasn't been kind to me. This time I actually just got a sore throat. So if my voice sounds a little off, it is because of that.
Okay. What's your excuse for all the other days when your voice sounds a little off? You don't have to answer that. So this episode, we've got kind of a mishmash of different things to throw at you because Luis and I were looking, and this is, of course, the episode that leads us into the set review next week, and we'll usually cover the mechanics for the new set coming out. But upon scrutiny, we've noticed that there is a grand total of one new mechanic in the new set, so that didn't give us a whole lot to talk about as far as that goes. We are going to talk about it, of course. And of course, we've got some preview cards to look at to give us a hint about what we might be seeing in Rivals of Ixalan next week when we do the set review. But we also thought, you know what? This is Luis's 3-year anniversary on the show, which you told me that I couldn't believe it. I still don't know if I believe it. Did you make it up? Or
no, I didn't. I even went back and looked at the show notes, and it's funny that the set releases actually line up pretty consistently because my first episode was the week before the Fate Reforged set review.
Yeah. God, that's insane. It's weird. You and I were chatting about it, Luis, and it still feels like you're the new guy.
It really does.
It's weird. We'll talk about it more in a minute, but you're the longest co-host.
Well, longest running,
longest running by a lot, right? Yes. Thank you, Luis.
I don't know how you verified that, but yeah, I'll take your word for it.
Well, I'll take Brian Wong's word for it. All right. So, we're going to be talking about that stuff and going over some of the, we'll call them highlights from Luis's run here so far on Limited Resources. Of course, show is brought to you by ChannelFireball. They're our sponsor, and they are the place to go for everything that you need Magic related on the internet. You can get everything. You can even get supplies there, right? If you need sleeves and deck boxes and that kind of stuff, you can get them. You can even get Limited Resources sleeves and deck boxes if you want to kind of show everybody at your local store, hey, I'm all about value, right? This is a good way to do it. I've seen quite a few of these out at the GPs and stuff. It's always fun to see them. Because people are repping the show out there, and I love seeing that. And of course, you can get singles, sealed product. You can sell your cards back. You can get free content. There's just a whole bunch of stuff waiting for you. If you're a Magic fan, ChannelFireball.com just has to be one of your daily stops to see what articles are up, what videos went up, and that kind of stuff. You can also support the show directly. That's via Patreon, patreon.com/limited resources. Everything's there. You can find all the information about what that is and how it works on that link, and everything's on lrcast.com as well. If you are a patron, you get access to a lot of cool stuff, actually. We will ask questions. We'll do our Q&A shows. We ask our patrons directly for questions on those, where we get to interact with them, and they get to ask questions on the Patreon question of the week. And we have that. This one comes from Mark, who says, Marshall and Luis, love the show. I've been listening since oddly enough, day one of the Wong era. So kind of interesting because, we've got your anniversary here, and he came in on the first day of Brian Wong when he was the co-host. He says, I have a more lighthearted question. What are your guys' opinions on chaos drafts? Strategies. Lastly, what would be your 3 packs to bring to Chaos Draft to open? Thanks for the best limited content out there. Sincerely, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And by the way, this is a very Brian Wong-esque question because Brian is a huge fan of Chaos Draft. He loves it. I think it's, probably his favorite format. He is a massive fan of doing Chaos Drafts, and he has a big bucket full of booster packs that people have pitched in over the years over at his place, and he'll host Chaos Drafts out of that thing every once in a while. What's your thoughts on Chaos Draft? Have you had a chance to do many of those, Luis? I don't think we've had a Chaos Draft PT as of yet.
We haven't, but I've done a decent amount of Chaos Drafts. I did one at Gen Con this year. It was the Rochester draft with packs from Unlimited up until what
the hell?
Yeah, I remember.
It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Invasion draft, and
didn't you lose in the finals?
I did.
Oh my god!
I lost to Juzam Jin, which is a reasonable fellow to lose to, and of course, piloted by Bob Marr, also a reasonable fellow.
TGO with a Juzam Jin is a tough combination to beat, but that was like an actual one too, right? Like like what's it called? Arabian Nights.
Yeah, there's Jusum's only in Arabian, and this was.
Oh, this
was a chaos draft. There was packs from all over the place, and I'm pretty flexible when it comes to chaos draft. Like, I don't tend to try anything too fancy because, when you're drafting with 24 different packs or something along those lines, sometimes you have two of the same pack, somewhere in the draft. You can't really draft the set themes unless they're pretty open-ended. So what I tend to do is look for like, 2 card combos is fine if you already have one of the cards and you pick up a second one. But you're not taking like, a pirate build around in a chaos draft, right? That just doesn't make any sense. No. You're kind of drafting for power, looking for cards that are easy to cast because you're 3 colors a lot of the time. And trying to do stuff that's sweet.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember the first few times I chaos drafted and I thought, oh my God, this is going to be sick. Like, I'm going to be, stacking up counters using some weird, ability from one set and then, kind of abusing it by saying, oh, I get more counters of that type, but it was never really meant to be with these type of counters. And, I thought I was going to have all these crazy cross synergies and stuff like that. And the truth is that it doesn't play out like that a lot, which is actually why Brian loved it. It's just bare bones magic, right? Just here's my 4/3, I'm going to attack you with it and I might have a combat trick. Like, that's the kind of stuff that it comes down to when you chaos draft. And by the way, for those of you who don't know what chaos draft is it's when you draft with packs of all different sets. You can just pick whatever random ones you want. Luis, being the high roller that he is, goes for the, unlimited and Arabian Nights ones. But most people will just, here's a pack of Theros. So there's an M15, that kind of stuff gets thrown in. And, one of the neat things that you can do with Chaos Draft that you don't really get a chance to in any other format is some people will actually booster draft the booster packs. Because going to Mark's last question about what 3 packs would we bring to open, like if we could choose them. Well, sometimes what they'll do is they'll Rochester basically the draft set. So, we'll randomly pick. And Luis, if you got first pick, there could be packs from all different types of sets. And you have to think to yourself, oh man, what do I really want to get? Do I want to take one that has, say, Doomblade at common? Like, that would be pretty tempting because you have a reasonable shot of hitting it. Or do you think about it and you think like, oh, this has Manticore or whatever in it. So, even though it's a rare, I'm just going to take this pack and hope to spike because it's like the best possible card I could get.
I think you should take the pack. First of all, pick the packs that you think would be fun to draft with. But going past that, if you're trying to, win the draft, if you want to crush everyone, look at the commons in the set. Like Urza's Saga, I think, is one of the best packs to open because it has Pestilence at common, Corrupt at common, Expunge at common. You also want to open like Tempest. It has Rolling Thunder at common.
Rolling Thunder, yeah.
And even some other cards like Capsize is absurd in Chaos Draft because the format's a lot slower. And besides those 2, I would be tempted to open, again, probably something on the older side. I'm assuming you don't have access to like super old packs, but if you have like 4th or 5th edition, those are good to open. Like, they're not like expensive, crazy expensive like revised, but they have some very powerful commons.
Well, Mark's just letting us bring anything we want. Obviously we'd be like, oh, I'd open 3 betas or whatever, but as far as power level, and I think, what I would do, and by the way, what I would recommend if you do have a choice is, and if you're drafting the packs, like I mentioned, the sets that right? Because like I hear you saying like, oh, you should take Urza's whatever, but like I might do that because you told me that, but like I don't know these sets at all. You know what I mean? And so I would probably retreat to something that I understood, that I knew what was going on with it, so that I had a good chance to know what I could open and what I could get out of it or where I could go with it. Like I'd probably take like Rise of the Eldrazi. Like I'd probably just go for 3 of my favorite sets. I'd go like Rise, Innistrad, M13 or something like that.
Yeah, that's a reasonable selection.
Just for fun. Yeah. Anyway, you should try it, by the way, those of you at home, because one thing that, I'm harping on occasionally, is, don't just open up your stupid booster packs. It drives me nuts when people just like open them up and just, oh, what did I get? It's like, dude, you can play something with that. Like, you don't have to, I've never been one to say like, you can only open packs during an 8-person booster draft. I don't care what you do, but at the very least, you could have you can play some version of one-on-one pack wars type stuff, right? I mean, there's all these versions that I know that you've been playing, and you and I've played a little of the Pygal Magic we talked about. There's the ones where you just have to play everything. I'm not going to say what the name of that game is. There's just the sort of traditional one, what do they call it?
Just like Mini Master.
Mini Masters, yeah. Where you get 2 of each land and you just do it. And it takes 5 minutes. It's not some deep experience, but it's fun, right? It's just something crazy happened, or you have something to laugh at, or you play for the pack, or whatever it is. And, this is a good way, these chaos drafts, if you happen to have a bunch of booster drafts laying around, because I get it. If you have a random Urza's Saga booster pack, what else are you going to do but open it, right? You're not going to find somebody else with one just at your random shop, and, you're not going to get enough of them together to have an actual draft. So I don't care about that if you opened it, but maybe you throw it in the box and you put yourself a chaos draft together with your friends, and it's a good way to not just to just rip those packs for nothing. Okay. So Luis, 3 years, man.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You're number one. That's the part that surprised. It's weird. For me, for my perception of it, it goes backwards in time. You've been with me the shortest, and then Brian the next, and then John the next, and then I was the longest with Ryan, which is, I think, possibly opposite of the truth.
I think it goes me, Brian, Ryan, John.
Okay, so almost the opposite.
In terms of the number of episodes we've done.
Yeah. God, it's weird though, right? 3 years?
It's a long time.
I mean, you're old now.
Well, I was old before.
I'm really old now.
Well, no argument there. But,
I just had my birthday.
Yeah, and what I ended up feeling like doing when I saw that, because we were talking about what we were going to do on the show this week, is I thought it would be interesting to look back at the episodes that I found particularly notable and kind of what we got out of them, the TLDR of those episodes, for a couple of reasons. One, there's a lot of good strategy to talk about. I think that it was fun looking back and seeing wow, we did do a lot of, I think, pretty good episodes. Mm-hmm. The other is that I can't imagine at this point that everyone's familiar with our entire catalog. In fact, there's just got to be tons of people who I'm the only co-host they've known, and they started well into my run. So
yeah,
they probably just haven't seen a bunch of these early episodes.
No, it's true. And, and this is something that I always wonder if we should do more of. I feel like it comes across, and I see the comments and the things that people say, and I think it does come across, but we don't talk about our mission statement directly, right? We don't talk about, calling it a mission statement's a little strong, but you know what I mean? The thing that you and I care about and the reason why we're here, right? And our philosophy, right? The thing that we're trying to get done with this show, because, if you go way back in time when Ryan and I were originally mapping out, okay, well, what should a podcast look like? What should our show be? Why are we doing it? Right? We were asking these sort of kind of open-ended, curious, innocent questions, because what our take on it was that the current slate at the time, remember, this is 2009, by the way. The current slate at that time of podcasts for Magic just weren't up to snuff for us. We were just thinking, these are fine to bad. There was just this range of kind of mediocre stuff, and there was nobody doing anything about limited. And so, Ryan and I thought, okay, well, we're going to do this. But him and I are both kind of get into the nitty gritty of it. So we were talking a lot about, well, what should our show be? Why are we doing it? Why do we care about this? Because we needed to have kind of a driving force for how we would make our decisions for the show. And one of the things that we knew right away was that we wanted it to be informative, right? We wanted to cater directly to our audience or our perceived audience and give them tools and information and takeaways and a plan and, these shortcuts and anything that could help them actually get better, and that we would put ourselves kind of on the back burner to that. right? That it wasn't a show about, hey, it's Marshall and Ryan hour, right? Just like I feel the same way. It's not Marshall and Luis, the happening. Here we are, this is us.
You get some glimpses of us just hanging out, but that's more like in the sign off or, as we're kind of like, the intro. The bulk of the show is us trying to deliver something specific.
Right. And that thing that we decided to make the core of the show back then, and that has been an absolute criteria for each co-host that has come on since, and that Luis has really embraced as well, is we want to make you better at Limited and at Magic in general in some ways too. But, our goal, our philosophy is that we want you to be better. And that is and has always been our goal. And we've let that guide us. And we hit a nerve, right? I mean, there's every chance that people go, this is boring. It's too instructional. I don't care. Right. But what we know about Magic players is they really value that kind of information and that kind of stuff. And it's easy to get off topic, right? It's really easy to just have a show like, hey, Luis, what'd you do this week? Oh man, that's cool. Yeah, I've been to the mountains before too. And you're just like, what are we talking? What is going on here? Right. And I've seen way too many shows get to that point. So Luis and I are always trying to be like, when the mics go on and when we go, we want to make sure that you're walking away from this show with something in your brain about, okay, I'm a little better now, or I have something I want to try this weekend or my next draft or whatever. And then there's other stuff too, right, Luis? I mean, it's not, it kind of, that has to be the umbrella, but there's got to be stuff under it.
Yeah. And what I wrote earlier, before you even said all this, like what I wrote in my show notes this afternoon was,
in your show notes. Okay. Yeah.
Well, the show notes are for both of us. What I mean is I wrote this without talking to you. And yeah, I think we're on the same page. And,
for sure.
And that is that the number one bullet is make listeners better at Limited.
Yeah.
This has just always been the number one priority. And, like you said, like there are a lot of ways this could have gone. And, we have a lot of different modes, right? Like when we're in the booth, we're, doing coverage of official events. We're pretty serious. We're trying to bring you strategy with a little bit of lightheartedness. When we're streaming, it's all nonsense.
It's goofy, yeah.
Like when I stream, it's, my first priority is entertainment. Like, I want to explain what I'm doing and hopefully people get some value out of it, but it is entertainment. When I do a video, it's like somewhere in between. I think the most business-like I am on point is in a lot of ways here on Limited Resources because...
I reel you in real good.
Yeah. Well, it is just because our number one priority is making you better, and that is a guiding principle where even though these shows can vary very wildly in terms of what our content is, I think we both want a very strong takeaway from every show. And sometimes that means we're going to talk about how to draft pirates in Ixalan or try to draft vampires. And sometimes that means we're going to talk about how to make in-game decisions or mulligan or some kind of more theoretical point. But either way, we want you to have something where at the end of it, you feel like you got better. And that's also a mix of teaching you how to fish in terms of level ups and also giving you fish in terms of like archetype guides. Yep. I think it's good to have both of those things. So
I do too. Yeah. And that is really at the core, by the way. That was a conscious decision because I should talk just briefly, but in a bigger picture perspective about how,
briefly, that's not part of the mission statement, by the way.
Here goes my point. Yeah. About how I approach content making. And basically what happened was when we decided to do the show, I had a hunch. That was it. I just had a hunch that said, this is what I would like to listen to, right? I want somebody to teach me how to get better at this so that when I go to the store, I don't feel lost. And so that's what we doubled down on. That's what we went all in on. We said, this is what we're doing and we're just going to put it out there. Now we had no idea if there was a market for that. It turned out there was. So my hunch was right. I got lucky. And ever since, that's how I've approached making content. Because there's two ways to do it, right? There's the way that says, what is my core audience, right? Like I want to hit, these people age blah, 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 to blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to try to now make stuff for them. The problem with that is that if you're doing that, you're not making what you want to make necessarily. And then you don't make a show this long. You don't enjoy making a show this long if it's not what you want to put out. So that's why we got lucky in that regard. As it stands now, it's a matter of, we want you to know what you're going to get when you come here, right? When you hit that button on your phone or on your computer and you hear the music come on, we want you to know exactly what you're going to get.
We have music at the start?
Week in and week out. What's I put that in, Luis. Yes. You don't get to hear it. Do you even know what it sounds like?
No.
Well, anyway,
Look,
but yeah,
some things change in 3 years, some things don't. I'm just
yes. It's nice. I had it custom made by a great musician. Anyway, but so I just wanted to say that again, that this is, part of the background on what you're getting when you show up and why it exists that way. That being said, Luis and I are both maybe overtuned. I mean, we really do try to listen to like you and I still bounce ideas off of each other, right? Hey, we should be doing more of this, or, that kind of stuff. And it's easy to fall into like pure, autopilot. And I think we,
I will say
really
that the
try to
show evolved more at the beginning, when I joined. But that's natural because we're both trying to hit our stride and figure out how we were going to manage it. But I still see us, I still like that we're trying new things, and I still like that we're trying to refine what we're doing.
Remember when everyone got mad at you at first?
Oh yeah, people did not like me when I showed up. Or,
it was funny,
or at least there were a vocal segment to it. And
I would not say people did not like you, but there was definitely some who were like, "What the hell?"
But part of that was also me trying to figure out where I fit in terms of the podcast. This was a new medium for me. So I thought it would be cool.
And I knew that, by the way. I was always like, don't worry about that. Like we'll find our stride. It doesn't happen on the second episode of doing a show,
No, I have it here right near. It's on the third.
It was on the third, right? But it did happen quickly, to be fair. I mean, you and I always had good chemistry and stuff anyway, so I wasn't worried about that. It was just a matter of like, getting our topics lined up and stuff.
Well, and this is one of the more scripted things I do. You and I don't do a whole lot of scripted material. This is actually about as close as we get, right? Like we don't, like when we're doing coverage and we're doing videos, when we're playing in tournaments, like none of that's like scripted exactly.
No, but you and I are much, much better when we're not scripted, right? When we have for the
last 4 or 5 episodes, every word we've said has been scripted. We're reading.
Yeah, right. And for people that don't know, we do use show notes. We have a shared Google document that we'll put the outline.
It's like 550 pages right now.
Is it really?
I know because
Is that why it takes so long to load?
Yes, I went through all of them.
Oh my God, it's 500 pages. You're not kidding. Okay. How far does it go back?
It goes back to my first episode.
Oh, that's random. I must have restarted it for you because we've been using these before anyway. But we do use
I know because I looked at the older one as well, which I have access to. So
okay,
my first episode is actually on the older one. Every other episode past that is on this one.
Okay, that's really funny. All right, well, I'll start a new one. But anyway, what I was saying is we do use one just for a little behind the scenes, but we only use it as an outline. The reasoning for that is just so that we don't get deep on a topic and just forget one wing of it that we were supposed to cover and go, oh my God, we didn't talk about blankety blank. It's just
I think we both found the show quality get better when we had a good outline. Cause I will say that like I initially did not come in thinking I was going to do extensive show notes, but I found that to be very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you got there. So what shows you want to talk about?
All right. So I'm going to go through these and you can chime in with what you remember from them as well, clearly, but, okay. I'm going to start with the 266. That's the first show, just because that's when I joined. That was the Khans of Tarkir Sunset show and Fate Reforged preview show. So,
and at the time you were still full-time playing Magic, right?
I had already moved to Denver, so I was already working as a game designer. So, but I was still playing a good amount of Magic.
You were still doing the Pro Tour stuff, and you hadn't done coverage very much. You and I were in the booth a couple of times at that point. Is that right?
Yes, we had done some. We were the weekend we announced
maybe a bunch of times.
The weekend we announced it, we were actually doing coverage of Grand Prix Denver.
Yep. Yes, I remember this. God, that was. I have to say, like while we're reflecting on that was fun. That was really cool because I remember that you and I worked out all the details and all this stuff and, going back to, I mean, I can I just tell the story or what?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, this is it was funny because, when Brian left, I was really like stunned. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Right. Because I remember when Ryan left and I thought, well, the show's over because it was me and Ryan and that's what the show was. And I was just going to quit. And I just thought it had served its purpose. It was good to go. And I didn't no. And then, Zame introduced me to John, and then I really clicked with John right away. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I guess we're still doing the show, and people love John, and off we went. And then it started to become more solidified after that, and I started thinking to myself, well, this is just a thing that maybe we'll just keep going, and then I begged Brian to come on after John left, and he finally acquiesced, and everything was good there too. And then when he left, I was like, oh man, now what the heck am I going to do? Right? Because it was super stressful for me, right? Like now this had become part of my job, and I had put a lot of my time and effort and resources into it. And I was just like, what is going to happen? And I had, had a few names in the hat, and I had tried out some stuff, and I was kind of floating at the moment. And when we were at a GP, you weren't actually covering this one. But you were playing in it. And I don't remember what GP it was, but I remember it specifically because I was on the judge stage, which if you've ever been to a GP, is this kind of raised up area where the judges meet and all the record keeping and computer stuff happens. And I'm standing up there, and I was kind of on my way somewhere, and you're like, hey, come here for a sec or whatever. I'm like, okay, what's up? And, you said, I know you're looking for somebody for LR. And I was like, yeah, I am. And, and we kind of chit-chatted about that for a minute. And you were just like, well, it wouldn't be impossible or something. I can't remember how you worded it, but you kind of threw your hat in the ring. And I was like, really? And you're like, yeah, like I'm, maybe we could talk about it or something like that is what you said. I'm like, well, yeah. Like I was like, that would be just super awesome. But I was completely that is not what I thought you were going to tell me. I thought you were just going to tell me some story or show me a draft thing or whatever. And I was like, holy crap, because I didn't even ask you. Because I just thought he's so busy. You had 100 things going on at the time with all your stuff. And I just thought, I'm not even going to bother. Right. Because how, I don't know, it's weird. Like think about that. If you needed to hire somebody for a company or something, and they're like, here's your dream candidate, but you're just like, yeah, but I'm not going to that's too high or whatever. And then you just came up and said you might be interested. And I'm just like, look, like if you're interested, I would love, cause you and I were friends at that point. We got along really good. And I was like, that would be sweet. And, we were actually able to do it. And, it kind of culminated with GP Denver where, after we had gotten everything worked out, to bring LR over to CFB and have you as the co-host and all of these things. You told me, hey, I got the clearance. We can announce this on the air at the GP in Denver. And I'm like, oh, that is so cool. And it was absurd because when we did it, it was between rounds or whatever. It wasn't some like dun, 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 it was just like, we just kind of did it. And then it was like, all right, let's go to the next round. And then I checked my Twitter and it was like, blew up, like I had just a billion. I was like, oh my God. It was one of the first times that's happened to me where it was like, whoa, and the reception was so cool. And I remember being so happy, for that. That was really exciting stuff.
Yeah.
It was a big moment for the show too.
You got it almost right. It was actually at GPLA. We were both covering that.
We were covering it.
Yeah.
Okay. My bad.
But, but other than that, you were spot on. So I started onto the show. We do the first show, and the sunset shows are pretty scripted, and the previews are, we just kind of toss it out. But the next show is where things got interesting because I just got thrown right in because we did the Fate Reforged set review. Mm-hmm. And what I think we both got out of this, at least the biggest thing in terms of the show, was that we actually spent too long on it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those set reviews were too long. I remember afterwards thinking like, we can't do that. Like it was like 5.5 hours or something for the common uncommon review. And it's actually harder to, in some ways, speak less about something than more, like explaining something in fewer words rather than more. And we were getting into our rhythm in terms of not stepping over each other, or repeating the same thing. So
yeah, definitely. I remember that standing out too.
Yeah. I think our set reviews have gotten tighter since then. The next growing pain was actually 4 episodes later, 271. That was the Pro Tour Grand Prix recap where we just kind of talked about my tournaments. And it was like, this is not what this show should be about.
Right.
Because tournament report is something I could write for, a certain website where you could get free strategy, ChannelFireball.com.
Yeah, I was going to say, you could just say the name of the website. I said it like 10 times.
But that's not what this show is about. And I think that, we were, that show I remember standing out as like, wow, we really weren't delivering on what we want to deliver, which is something that makes you, the listener, a better Magic player.
Yeah. And that was one of the interesting things of that having you as the co-host that was a challenge that we had to face, which was, I want to leverage the fact that we have one of the best players ever and an active professional player where we've never had that before, right? Like there has to be stuff that we can get that isn't, that I couldn't get before, from my other co-hosts, because they didn't play on the Pro Tour at the time of recording, at least. But it turned out that, we needed to kind of turn the knobs at the beginning on figuring out exactly what that is, because the tournament report thing didn't resonate. It didn't hit our core philosophy either, right? Like that might have been mildly entertaining, or they might have even been rooting for you, but what's the takeaway from it, right? So that was us just, I think, figuring out how to leverage you, right? And get the most out of you. And, those ended up becoming those kind of testing insider style shows,
which we'll get to in a second. Episode 273, and this is one I highly recommend. If you have not heard this episode, I really do recommend it, because this episode sums up what I believe is the most important part about Magic, which is playing with a plan. This is a level up episode, and the level ups are where my heart really lies here. It is fun to talk about the current limited format, because that's what we're playing right when we're in full swing. In a couple of weeks, we'll be playing a lot of Rivals, and we'll be pretty juiced to talk about it. But
God, I hope we will be.
But in a lot of ways, I do the show for the level ups, because those are what I just really love, and those are episodes that are trying to give you a set agnostic lesson that that you can apply to both limited and not limited generally.
Yeah. And a lot of those are applicable to greater.
And so playing with a plan is just how you should play. Every play you make, every turn you play, has to feed into whatever your plan is. And really impressing that upon people is, I think, the most important thing you can do for them. Because if you look, a lot of people just play their cards. You can tell they're just playing their cards. They're not doing plays because of what they're going to do in 2 turns or what their game plan is. They're just playing their cards. And making that jump is one of the hardest things you can do as a Magic player. But once you do, things get so much easier. Because if you know that your plan is to win with a 7-drop, then it's become so clear that, of course, you block their 2/2 with your 3/2. Of course, you don't want to trade 3 damage for 2 damage. And that sort of thinking is what leads you to making a lot of plays that further your end goal, not just whatever looks good at the time.
Yeah, and it gives you what I see when I see people take that advice to heart is confidence, right? And I don't mean feigning confidence. I mean being confident about their decisions, because a lot of times when somebody goes, okay, I attack you for 2, and you have a 2/2 and they have some mana up, and they make an action, you could pause time and say, why did you do that? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I guess I could just take the 2 because I'm at 20, or I blocked because I don't know, right? Because it's hard to figure that out. But, if you give them that goalpost of, okay, well, what you're trying to do is make this game go as long as possible, right? That's your thing. And they go, oh, then I'm going to block, because I want to take less damage and I want to try to trade creatures so that the game goes longer. And now they're like, I get it, right? I did this for an explicit reason. It wasn't just, I guessed. And that is a really fun moment to break through on, where you see people start to piece together these game plans. But without that plan ahead of time or understood at the time, a lot of times it's more guesswork and a lot less confidence there. I think about, by the way, that show to me is one of the defining ones for you. Like every co-host, everybody on this show that's ever been part of this show has brought a lot to the table, right? But there's things that really stick and really become part of the ethos of this show. And to me, your number one is that it's playing with a plan. It's have a plan. When I think about what is Luis's, number one thing, right? Like when I think of Brian, he brought a lot of the concepts that we use on the show, but I think of quadrant theory, right? A big picture look at how to look at cards and evaluate them. When I think of John, he always brought a longer game approach and a different spin on different types of cards. Ryan just built the foundation, along with me, but he was a big part of the foundation for a lot of the stuff that we talk about when him and I started it. But when I think of you, I think have a plan.
And I think that this remains the thing that I would like to impress most upon people. So again, episode 273, very, very important because this is how I think about Magic, and that's part of what I can deliver here. Mm-hmm, sure. Episode 275 on the lighthearted side. It's when we introduced Harold. This is the bear on the bike, the third mascot.
That's right.
The etymology of that being, of course, that I was wondering what people think about when they're playing really slow, and it's the bear on the bike just going in circles in their head.
I
Episode
remember that.
280 is when we really hit our stride in terms of utilizing and leveraging the Pro Tour, and that's the Pro Tour Insider Show. That's what we do when I've been testing for the Pro Tours, which I still do. You know, I go to all the Pro Tours. I'm going to Bilbao in, you know, a month or whatever. And it boils down what we have at the format at the time. And this is, I think, pretty valuable because you get a glimpse of what I plan to do at the Pro Tour, which is the highest stakes Magic the next day. And it is like, you know, right or wrong. I believe in it enough to do it. And this is my attitude going in. And
you're putting your tournament on the line.
Right.
And, you know, Pro Tours only happen 4 times a year. It's a big deal.
It really is. I mean, first place prize is $50,000. So when you look at articles or podcasts or thing, this is the real skin in the game section, because I am telling you what my plan is to do. Because, you know, once the Pro Tour goes live, it doesn't help anyone to hear the show. Like who's in the Pro Tour, I mean. I'm not worried about leaking in that sense. So I thought that was really useful, and it really made us think of, like, we have this resource. How can we utilize it best? And that's just a good attitude to take. 283 is our first official sealed episode that I could find. I mean, it was an unwieldy document, but I'm pretty sure that was the first time when we started
pages
to go set by set, go over sealed, because a lot of people who listen to the show play sealed, and it is very, very useful to do that.
Yeah, and that's been one of the changes that's happened on your watch, right? Is we've dedicated one show per set now for sealed specifically, where before it might get thrown in as a topic or it might not. But like you said, a lot of our listeners really spoke up about it too. They really said, look, I'm going to go play a PPTQ. It's sealed. Like if I make the top 8, I get to draft, but you know, I need to know how to play sealed for this format. And, you know, or I'm going to my first GP. It's sealed, right? Like this is a thing that people really found, you know, that they wanted to have for every set. And we made that adjustment then.
So, the next one is actually funny. It's this is 286. This is another one I would very much recommend going back and listening to. It's a level up. It's the 10 biggest traps in Limited. And so the way this started,
dude, I can only think of the one trap.
Well, the one is the best. The way this started was actually a sign off. I had written the notes for a sign off, and you're like, "This isn't a sign off. This is just a show."
That's right.
So
I remember that. I was like, dude, what are you doing? You can't use this as a sign off. This is too good.
So we're going to go through these pretty quickly, but I think it is a good list. And, you know, looking at it, it still holds true. So the 10 biggest traps in Limited, starting at number 11, for reasons you'll find out in a second, is taking or playing too many cards that don't affect the board. And we go in depth on this in a follow-up episode, which I will definitely be talking about. And these are cards that, like, aren't creatures and aren't removal spells, essentially. So kind of card draw, combat tricks to some degree, though kind of weird uncommons and rares. You don't want too many of those. Playing the take their best cards, these surgical extraction, pithing needle, cranial extraction type cards. Like, people do this. It is definitely a trap. This next one's kind of funny, given that we're coming off of Ixalan, which is 1/1 creatures with upside, like 1/1 flyer for 1. Everyone loves these.
Now they're just good.
You're not supposed to play them, except actually right now you are. So this one may have not aged quite as well, but in really aggressive formats, or outside of really aggressive formats, 1/1 creatures for 1 or cheap with upside are just usually not worth it. They're just too small.
Yeah.
Bad equipment is number 8. You know, cards like Loon and Scimitar, 1 mana equip and 1 mana cost for +1/+1. Whisper Silk, Cloak, Brawler's Plate. Like, basically, equipment used to be really, really good. Mm-hmm. And then it was really, really bad for a long time. And I actually think, like, up till Pirate's Cutlass, most of the equipment has been bad recently.
Yeah, that's true.
Number 7 is playing good aggressive cards in non-aggressive decks. You know, there was a time in Limited where non-aggressive decks existed. And
and people would play those
super
efficient combat tricks or whatever.
Right, or like overrun type effects in decks that aren't aggressive.
Yeah.
Number 6 is forcing colors. People force colors or strategies all the time.
Yeah.
Number 5 is forcing colors without knowing it. This is when your preferences have dialed into a particular combination too much, and you just now see, like, you just love drafting Merfolk, and now you're first picking, River Herald's Boon over, the Imperial Aerosaur. So because you now think it's better, so you're actually forcing it even if you don't think you are.
Right.
Number 4 is don't be too optimistic. Don't evaluate cards based on the best possible scenario. The best case scenario mentality. It looks like you put in that note there because I didn't really know what that was.
Yes.
And these are cards that have a wide range, and people tend to look at the top of the range when they decide how to play them. Number 3 is comparing the cards you have against a potential pick when you're deciding which colors to be in. And the example I have here is you have 2 good black cards and 3 good red cards, and you see a mediocre black card and a really good white card. Mm-hmm. And it's really easy to say 2 good black cards plus a mediocre black card is better than a good white card. But when you see a 6-pick good white card, it's a really big signal, and you get a lot of implied future value by taking it.
Right. So it's not just that white card.
Draft is forward-facing as well as back-facing. Number 2 is sticking to a rare when the color isn't open. People do this all the time. They open a great rare, and they just never get off it. That is a trap.
Classic trap.
And do you want to hit number 1 for us?
Is it Lava-Ball trap?
That is the biggest trap. It is 6 red. There's no trap bigger than that. Lava-Ball trap is officially the biggest trap in Limited.
That is so bad. And you just had to do it.
That's where the sign up came from. I wanted to make a list.
It was just a setup for that.
Yeah. It was literally that. But anyway, that was a level 2, number 286. I think a pretty good episode, and one that also informed the show in terms of it may seem kind of like surface level, but having a list like that makes it a lot easier for people to understand and digest this information. There's a reason a lot of articles have lists. People love lists. And I'm not trying to say that we're turning into, limited BuzzFeed.
No, but lists when appropriate are really good.
They are, because people look at them and they're like, I understand number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 and 6 I can work on, instead of just a large block of information.
Yeah, it's just when people stop going in depth on anything and just start throwing lists up on their stuff. That's when it's like, what? This is hollow. There's not much there. Yeah. So.
Number 288 is another level up. This is what's the play? This is in-game decision making, and this really showed us how challenging it was to basically
this was ambitious.
Improve your just overall decision making and fundamentals in Limited, because there's a lot of concepts we can talk about which are very clear, right? Having a plan is hard to maybe implement, but you understand the concept. Looking at the biggest traps, those are actually even a little easier. You're like, don't play 1/1 flyers for 1. Again, setting aside that it's okay to do that right now, right? How to make better in-game decisions is really hard. So that was one where that was us taking a stab at it, and it's something I think we might revisit, because part of what's so good about Limited is how dynamic it is and how the situations are novel.
Yeah.
LR 290 is 9 habits of effective Limited players, because looking at what is successful for successful Limited players is very, very important. And that's something that's worth checking in on, because the reason that this is something people look at both here and, of course, there's the famous motivational book, right? The 9 habits or 7 habits of effective Limited people, of successful people.
Successful, or just, is it? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
It's because even if you don't know why these are good, if a lot of the people who are achieving the thing you're trying to achieve do them, there's a good indication that it's good. And
right. Or if you do something that's not on there, or you do it the opposite.
And a good takeaway from that is, it's like if you're debating between playing 40 cards and 41 cards, and you look and every single platinum level pro plays 40 cards, you don't even necessarily have to know why 40 is better than 41 to just use that knowledge to say that, playing 40 is probably better. Of course, it's better to understand these things, but there's a shortcut, which is if a lot of successful people do it, then it's probably a good idea. LR 286 is a very surprising one. This was a CABS theory, cards that affect the board strategy theory.
The board state.
Cards that affect the board state theory. But this came out of Magic Origins, and in fact, when we wrote this episode, it wasn't even really a level up. It was more like us just talking about Magic Origins, which is the most CAB set in existence.
Right.
And the theory is pretty simple. It's draft a good curve, draft creatures, draft removal spells, draft all cards that do something. And what I think was surprising to both of us is this sounded like it wasn't actually useful to say this.
It almost seemed too obvious, right?
Right. But it wasn't. This was actually one of our most well-received episodes, and a lot of people said it really helped. And what that I think teaches is, first of all, don't take for granted a lot of what people know or don't know.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to Limited. Limited is hard. Second, it's good to just really reinforce these fundamentals. And if you haven't listened to this episode, this is a particularly good one. It is good to just understand this and just explain why you should not take 4-mana cards that don't affect the board. And yes, some of these cards are good and sometimes it's appropriate to play them. But if you break things down to fundamentals, it's a good way to, especially if you're not having success in a particular format, start there and build from that. I think that's something that's a really good takeaway even now.
Yeah, and that was a big talking point for us on that show as well, was that the idea behind it and what we were getting through wasn't this is how you should draft. That wasn't the takeaway. The optimal way to draft is not cabs, right? It is actually you are throwing in some cards.
It's more complicated than that.
Right. But if you do not know how to draft a deck like this, right? And we talked in depth about what these decks look like, why, and how to draft them. But if you do not have that tool, if you do not understand the fundamental basics of these things, you are putting yourself at a disadvantage. And I'll tell you what, walk into any F&M where they're doing a draft and walk up to a random person and say, can I see your deck? And I'll tell you what, if they would have drafted cabs, that person gives themselves a darn good shot at picking up some match wins and getting on the board and getting a feel for the format. And if they're sitting there staring down at all these card draw, random enchantments, equipment, all this stuff that just doesn't really do anything, I guarantee that their win percentage is lower, for your random person like that.
And again, if there's something that is complicated or difficult, going back to fundamentals and making sure you have a good base is a good way to approach that. Yeah, you're not tackling the whole entirety of limited theory in one gulp. You start by saying, okay, how can I make sure my decks are effective and functional? And then let's spruce them up from there. Mm-hmm. LR300 is funny because that was the PAX panel. It was all the co-hosts on the show.
Oh my God. That was so fun.
Ryan, John, and Brian. And that was really cool. So I don't remember any actually very useful takeaways, but that's a cool one to look back
on. But that was a show we did live at PAX in front of an audience that waited to see us. Like, that was awesome. I had such a good time interacting with all the people that came out. They clapped for us. It was just super, super fun. And of course, we even managed to dig up John and Ryan. And, John was hamming it up and making fun of me the whole time. And I was like trying to kind of moderate you knuckleheads. It was just like,
that kind of is your job.
It is kind of my job, but I was like, wow, all of you at once, that was a lot. But I have to say, that was an absolutely special day for me, to be able to interact with people live. Like, it had such a different feel. Man, I hadn't thought about that in a while, but I'm glad you brought it up. That was great.
Episode 301, on the back of cabs, we had Uber theory.
You are a genius of some sort. It's probably evil. I don't know, but how you came up with Uber.
Ultimate big endgame ramp theory.
Yes.
This
was great. I loved this episode.
This was a joke name, but it was a serious effort to break down how to draft the opposite of Cab's deck, how to draft these complicated, weird decks with big late games. And
yes,
I think
that actually you and I like.
Right. I read and reread it and I was like, okay, yeah, this is still pretty good. This is maybe not the format for it in Ixalan, but when there are formats with a little spice to it, like Hour of Devastation, this theory fits perfectly.
Yes.
So number 301 is a good way to kind of get an intro to how to draft these bigger engine late game decks that are trying to do some fancy things, because that's part of Limited too. And I'm not even just saying that because we like to draft them. It is right to draft these decks sometimes.
For sure. Yeah.
And kind of the way I look at Limited, and this is especially true when I've actually been writing a ton about Cube lately, it's not that you have to understand everything about every deck in the format. I kind of look at it as all the decks in the format are kind of like tools. And someone who has every tool in their tool belt is going to be more prepared for a situation than someone who only has a hammer.
Yeah. Yeah. But as many as you can get, right?
But you can still kill someone with a hammer. So
sure. But if hammer's not open.
Yes, if hammer's not open. But basically, you don't need to know every single deck in a format to be good. But the more you know, the better. And sometimes, these big ramp decks are part of the format. Like, again, in Hour of Devastation, very recently, knowing how to draft these sometimes will lead you to a great deck. So it's good to have a wide range, even if you don't need to tackle it all at once. It's good to have it eventually and build up over time, because once you learn this, maybe Hour of Devastation is done, but maybe, with Rivals, this is all of a sudden good. There's all these like weird treasure decks that have all these flip cards and 10-drop dinosaurs. Right. And because you have this baseline, you already know a good amount about how to draft and approach this.
I like this episode as well, just because it kind of encapsulates me and you. It's like this nonsense, name, but I believe there's really substance. Like we had fun with the name, right? We made a joke and it was funny, but we also brought the stuff.
Yeah, don't be fooled by the name, despite that, it is hilarious and genius and really clever, but it is a serious episode. 10 episodes later, we have episode 311, and this is our first appearance of Owen on the show. Owen Turnwald, who has been, I believe, the most frequent guest now, because he did the set reviews.
He could. Not of all time, right? Like Kenji still has to have him.
He's been the guest who's been on the most since I've started.
Okay, all right, I'll buy that. Yeah, Orat's been on a bunch, Ben's been on a bunch, Kenji's been on a few times too.
And here, one of the things that I found interesting about this episode is the main focus was he was saying never draft green in Battle for Zendikar.
Yeah.
And there's a couple things going on here that apply outside of that. One is that Owen was actually using a bit of hyperbole to prove his point. Like he was going really hard on that as a matter of principle, like just saying like 99 out of 100 times you shouldn't be doing this.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is interpreting what people mean when they say that kind of thing, because that's kind of our job. Like you've been around a lot of Magic players. They talk.
Oh my God. Yeah. You have to have a filter. I need a translator for half of it. But.
And the other is that some formats are really weird and very different from other formats.
Yeah.
Green in Battle for Zendikar is worse than any colors banned in any other format I've ever played.
It was really bad. I remember that.
And
Owen made it like a political talking point. Well, like he was on Twitter and everything,
He ran on a platform of no green.
Exactly.
But Owen did get some value by identifying that early on and avoiding it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the things you can look at is Magic is an ever-evolving game. And just because things were a particular way in the past does not mean they will be in the future. And just because the colors are generally balanced and limited, or, let's say, there's a best color and a worst color, but they're pretty close together where if the worst color is open, you just draft it. Sometimes you're going to have sets where things are even below that bar, and BFC green was, where even if I could tell you that green was open and you were the only green drafter, and you still might be like, yeah, but what else is in the pack?
Yeah, exactly.
So don't be too pigeonholed into what's happened in the past. There are a lot of ways to approach new situations that even if things like this haven't happened before, you have to be open to that.
Yeah. It was also cool to have Owen on, by the way, because I think he's really well spoken with this type of stuff. He's so direct and he knows what he's saying.
He's concise.
He's very concise, but also I liked getting him in our little arena, right? Yeah. Because a lot of times he says stuff and people are like, well, he's probably better than me. I'll just listen. But I don't have any problem asking him questions, right? I know that a lot of professional players have some ego attached where they don't want to ask a question and feel like, well, what if I look stupid? I'm like, I'll do it. I'll pick his brain and say, hey, why do you think this? Like, I'm not going to let you just say it louder than other people. You got to tell me. And the good news is he's got reasoning. Like you dig at him and he will produce. And that's why I think he's been, a really great guest whenever we've had him on.
The next one is topical now. This is 313. It's Mastering Cube. And this was our first look at how to draft Cube. I know that you did an episode with Brian before that, but
mm-hmm.
I actually think that it still applies if you're interested in drafting the vintage Cube online right now, because Cube is an interesting constructed limited hybrid, and trying to figure out how to navigate those waters I think is very interesting, because you're applying a lot of like normal-ish limited principles, but you're also doing the opposite of a lot of normal limited principles. So how well you can adapt to that and hold those things in your head while you're drafting Cube, especially since you're in an arena where things normally look very different,
mm-hmm.
I think is a good test of where you are in terms of Magic.
It's also just our favorite thing.
It also is. I've got a ton of articles on Channel 4 right now about Cube, and a lot of the same stuff is going on there.
Up too, yeah.
Episode 325 is Drafting Deconstructed, and this week's kind of like this is kind of coming on the heels of the Cabs Theory episode. This is 30 episodes later. It was just breaking down a draft from start to finish and trying to go step by step and giving you tips and strategies on how to get through each step. Because, like, what is your draft supposed to look like at pick 1, at pick 5, at pick 10? What do you look
God, I loved this show. This was such a fun one to do.
Into pack 2, what should you be thinking about? And I think approaching things from the nothing is too obvious or simple is very useful, because we are trying to give you the tools. And for the people who know this, great. They can get reinforcement that they're doing it the right way. Or maybe they disagree, and this is a way to look at, oh, those are some of their assumptions. I disagree with those. What does that mean? But for people who haven't heard this stuff, like, this is how you learn it. This is where it is.
Yeah, really nuts and bolts stuff in that one.
Going on a more set-specific episode, 333 was Shadows over Innistrad, and this is one of the episodes I liked best because we broke down the Delirium deck and the Blue-Red Spells deck. And that's not useful right now, right? You're listening today, and you're like, I don't care about how to draft Delirium and Shadows over Innistrad. and that's why there's mostly level ups here. But what I liked about this episode is that it gave us, I think, a good framework on how to break down draft archetypes. And I think we did a very good and clear job on that. And when you're looking at draft, we have a lot of pretty cleanly laid out archetypes these days, right? A lot of the sets have...
Especially in like Ixalan, yeah.
Right. Ixalan is very much like this. And I went back and I looked at our Ixalan archetype breakdowns. They're very similar to this one. Not quite as robust, because the decks we talked about in this episode were a little bit more complicated. But figuring out what makes each deck tick, how to describe a deck to someone who's never drafted it, what you should look for in a draft. This is all very useful stuff going forward for our understanding of the decks and, transmitting that understanding. Mm-hmm. Number 335, I think, is one of the most useful episodes in and outside of Limit. This is our episode on heuristics. And heuristics are essentially rules of thumb or mental shortcuts, ways to, basically 80-20 rules of, like, this is mostly going to be right. I can save time by not worrying about it. Mm-hmm. And heuristics are something you use all the time. And the example I gave was, you have figured out a route from home to work, right? You drive it every day. You know how it is. You don't really think about that anymore.
No,
like you have already figured this out. You don't need to solve the problem, right? You're not picking up Google Maps every day trying to figure out how to get to work,
right?
But sometimes, in the rare occasions, something changes. There's a traffic accident. They're doing construction, so they close a road. And when you learn that, you then say, like, "Hey, my heuristic is wrong. I better do something new."
Right. And
so the powerful thing about heuristics is you don't use brain space to think about your route to work. And some people take this really seriously, and they wear the same clothes every day. They order the same thing every day for lunch. They just don't want to think about those things because that saves them time and energy to think about other things they presumably care about more.
I think Mark Rosewater does that, and I think President Obama did that too.
A ton of people, like Elon Musk, does that. A ton of very successful people do that, and that goes back to our earlier point of 9 habits, right? Mm-hmm. It is useful to basically clear clutter from your brain and to save processing power for difficult problems, because getting to work is not a difficult problem. It should be pretty solved.
Right.
Now you can think about, when you're at work, the best way is to draft Ixalan.
Right. The important stuff.
Right. Because there's a lot of situations in your life and in Magic that are novel, that are new, that you don't have a heuristic for. But it's super powerful to use heuristics on the ones you do have. Like when you have a double white spell in your deck, play a Plains first, right? That's just, you don't have to think about that. Mm-hmm. And heuristics are both powerful and dangerous, because heuristics also lead you to really big pitfalls when there's something has changed and you don't adjust for that and you just use that heuristic. That's when you get in a lot of trouble.
Well, and that's kind of the interesting wrinkle with them, is that knowing when to look at them a little closer, right? Because, like, using your analogy, you could wake up every day and try to map out the best route using software and stuff, right? You could literally do that every day, where you're like, okay, today I'm going to go over this other way and time yourself and do all this stuff, but you don't want to, right? And it's the same thing in Magic, where it's like these decisions that come up as 80-20s most of the time, you're probably best off just doing that until you're at the level where you can start identifying the times when it's not.
And I will tell you
hard,
that,
by the way.
A lot of professional players, a lot of high-level Magic players use tons of heuristics. They don't try to solve every single turn of every single game anew. They don't try to bring new analysis to the question of like, do I block their 2-2 with my 2-2? And that saves them time for the really hard turns and the really hard plays. Mm-hmm. So trying to get a handle on this, it also helped your pace of play, by the way.
It does. It really does. Yeah, that's a great point.
Can get you a long way. And we go in pretty deep on this episode. This is I think a really good episode to learn, because people use heuristics all the time, even if they've never heard the word and don't know what the concept is.
Yeah,
because
you develop them naturally.
Well, there's just no way to navigate this world without them. You can't think about everything all the time from the beginning. Right.
Yep.
But figuring out the advantages and when you can like create them, because you do get to make them, and the drawbacks and the pitfalls with them is a really good thing.
Yeah.
Number 375 is an episode that I think that you found very useful, which is salvaging a train wreck draft. Because we've all been there.
What are you trying to say? Yeah.
And figuring out ways to navigate from the starting point of a garbage fire, I think is a very useful thing to do.
And by the way, this was inspired by listeners, by patrons and listeners asking us this question.
Are you saying that their listeners have train wreck drafts all the time?
Sometimes they do, and they said, look, I sometimes find myself most of the way through pack 2 and I look down and I'm like, oh my God, I'm 5 colors. I don't know what direction I'm going. What do I do from here? And that's what we talk about on that one.
Episode 385, we're catching up, is the Amonkhet set review. And the reason I called this one out is because I think Amonkhet was the format that we were surprised by the speed and how off our card evaluations were on a lot of cards. And that's worth digging into. We did some set re-reviews as well. And that's when you have things like Cartouche of Fury, the red cartouche or the white cartouche.
No, and that's not what it was called. What was it called?
Zeal, sorry. I was called Fury. Yeah. Cartouche of Zeal and Cartouche of Solidarity.
Mm-hmm. The white one?
Yeah. The white one. These ended up being like not only like playables, but actually reasonably high picks. You'd fourth pick a Cartouche of Solidarity and you would not feel too bad about it.
They ended up warping that format.
Right. Because
like when they left, yes, River Hoopu got good,
Right. The format rewarded you for having 1 and 2 drops, because if you go 2 drop into 2 drop plus Cartouche of Fury of Zeal, you were just destroying your opponent. Yeah, or if you went turn 1 Sacred Cat, 1/1 lifelink into turn 2 Cartouche of Solidarity, attack for 2, gain 2, have a 1/1 soldier into play. In such a fast format, these are really good. And we got those really wrong because we were looking at it, through a lens of what a normal Magic set would be.
Right.
And those cards still, I don't think, would be good in a normal Magic set.
Yeah, some of them would. I mean, like you and I both really liked Cartouche of Strength, for example.
Sure, we were that's a completely different card.
Because that's just a super different thing, right? Yeah, but those 2 cheap ones, they ended up being better than we thought.
Yeah, and then part of it, we looked at a mechanic like Embalm, right, where you got to get a creature back. That looks like it leads to slow, grindy formats. It just didn't. That's just not what the card file was like.
No, it was too slow.
The Amonkhet set review, I'm not recommending you go back and listen to this, by the way. Do not do that.
No.
It was
an eye-opener.
It was, and it caused us to reevaluate. It's also a good thing for listeners to think like, why did you get this wrong? What would I have thought initially? Like the set reviews are a good time for people to look at what they think about the cards. And we actually see this on the LRcast subreddit, a listener set review that comes out before ours.
Yes, where people get to contribute.
Right, and you get to crowdsource grades, and that is, I think, a very useful exercise because, first of all, we're not always right. That's just at the beginning, straight up, we're not always right. Second, trying to figure out what you think about a card, then listening to us, I think is a better way of learning than the other way around.
Oh, I agree.
If you listen to us,
taint your opinion,
and then you try to evaluate a card, you are going to be influenced by us one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Episode 414. So this is the last one I have called out here. It says how to bluff. This is a level up about ways to bluff your opponent, ways to be protected from bluffs, things that can go wrong or ways that you can fail in them. And I think this is a very useful episode because even if bluffing is not something you're about to start doing because it is a little tricky, it also just talks about how to play with and around combat tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very useful. You need to do that even if you don't want to bluff.
Yes.
So this is one of the level ups. I think it adds a lot of value though. Since this was relatively recent, I imagine a lot of people will have already heard it.
Yeah. So a couple things to mention here, by the way. One, just because we've covered a topic doesn't mean that we won't cover it again. And we always try to take a different angle or a different take or combine it with something else. We don't want to just, literally run a show back that we've done before. But we also view our mission here of getting you better at limited as something that, sometimes you need it drummed into your head a bit, right? It's not the kind of thing where we put out one show and then we bring the gavel down on it and say, well, we've talked about that. We don't assume that every listener's listened to every episode of our podcast, right? There's always new people coming and all that kind of stuff. And so we will, of course, continue to hit on these. But if you do want to go back and you want to listen to any of these shows that Luis and I just mentioned, they're all available on lrcast.com. They're just, I have literally every episode of the podcast ever on that website. I had to move it over from where we were before. It was a huge lift. It really sucked because I had hundreds of episodes, but I thought I want this archive. I want people to be able to go back and listen to stuff as they see fit. And all of these are available for listening there. You can also just, dig through your podcast app, and if it'll let you go back, they'll be there as well. But yeah, if you're interested in going back, they're there. So that's where you can find them. You can get them. You can also download them from there if you want to. Like I try to make the show available anywhere I can. Just like I want it to be easy for you to listen to it, basically. So, there's a download link on each of the posts for each show that you can just take the file itself if you'd like and put it wherever you want. So that's a thing you can do.
Yeah. And I think that looking back on this, I like the way the show has evolved. I think that there's a lot of useful stuff here. And especially if you have started listening a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, maybe more, and you may miss some of these episodes. I've given you a preview of what was useful in those episodes, and maybe you listen to them, maybe you don't, but you can still get a glimpse of kind of what we talked about, because a lot of these things just stand the test of time. They really do.
Yeah, that's very, very, very true. All right. So should we talk about Rivals for a little here?
We should.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the new mechanic. Right, which is called, what is it called? Ascend?
Ascend.
Yeah, Ascend. And Ascend is the only brand new mechanic in the format, though you will see a lot of returning mechanics. There's a little bit of Explore and et cetera. You'll see that kind of stuff. Raid is still there. But the new one's called Ascend. And Ascend says, cards that have it say Ascend. In parentheses, if you control 10 or more permanents, you get the city's blessing for the rest of the game. Okay. And that in and of itself doesn't actually do anything. The way that this works is when you either control a card with Ascend or cast a card with Ascend, it will check. And if you meet the requirement of controlling 10 permanents, which include lands, which include creatures, artifacts, enchantments, and tokens, treasure tokens, all that stuff, those all count. You count them all up. Then you get right then, and not before, by the way. This is a key thing to understand, is that you don't get the city's blessing simply by getting to 10 or more permanents. You actually have to have an Ascend card happen, either exist on the battlefield or be cast. And then you will get the city's blessing. Once you get it, there is a token that they're including in the packs that you can use to signify that you have it, though you don't have to. It's just a thing that has now happened. Think of it like an emblem. It can't be interacted with. Nobody can take the city's blessing from you. Nobody can destroy it or anything like that. And you have it for the rest of the game no matter what. Cards with Ascend care about that. And what they do is, generally speaking, they give you a bonus. It's that simple. Most of these cards look like the kind of thing where it says, here's something, but if you have the city's blessing, here's more. And you're going to see that a lot. Think creatures that get bigger. One of the ones that they used to sort of introduce it is called Ravenous Chupacabra. And it is 2 black for a 2/2 with, that's an uncommon. It's a beast horror. So it's not actually a tribal card. It says when it enters, dang it, I read the wrong one.
I wasn't sure where you were going with that.
Sorry. So what I actually wanted was the horse. This sucks. The link, the page that I'm using. Oh, it just came back up. All right. It's called Dusk Charger. This is the card I meant to say. So this is 3 and a black, also 4 mana, but this one's common.
This is the 3/3 that gets +2/+2?
Yeah. It's a 3/3 horse, and it has Ascend, gets +2/+2 as long as you have the city's blessing. Okay. So that's an example of a creature that can get bigger if you've got, once you meet that criteria. Another one that's kind of a sweet one is called Secrets of the Golden City. This one's 1 blue for a sorcery at common. It's got Ascend, and it says draw 2 cards. But if you have the city's blessing, draw 3 cards instead. So you get the idea here. Basically, it's rewarding you for having a bunch of permanents in play and making your cards better. So the way that I'm going to be looking at these when we get to the set review is 2. There's 2 columns, right? What's my baseline and what's my bonus? Because the way that this is going to play out most likely is that you just don't always get the key to the city, right? If your opponent's beating you down and you have to trade a bunch or whatever, or you miss some land drops, you're just not always going to be able to get that key to the city Ascend thing going. So you have to be at least okay with the first half of that card to play it. So for example, with the Dust Charger that we talked about a minute ago, are you okay with the 3 and a black for a 3/3 that's not in a tribe? Kind of no, probably not. I mean, it's not great, right? Like I'd much rather know, or at least think that I'm going to be working my way up towards getting the key to the city going. Even then I'm like, okay, it becomes a 5/5, but I'm going to assume that's later in the game. Maybe it's not. Maybe you have a bunch of Sailor of Means that give you kind of, 2 permanents for 1 card or whatever. But anyway, like Secrets of the Golden City, I actually am okay with that. As long as I'm heavy enough blue, okay, it's your favorite card ever. And then it just gets a nice bonus in the late part of the game. And it scales with the game nicely as well. So anyway, that's Ascend. It's pretty straightforward. The real question that we have to ask ourselves about Ascend is, if this set is as aggressive as it was before, you're never getting the key to the city,
how are you
right?
getting 10?
Yeah, you're just getting smashed all the time, right? So this makes me think maybe it'll be a little slower, because this is the marquee mechanic for the set. Like everything else is the same. You're going to see Enrage, you're going to see Raid, you're going to see Treasures, you're going to see Explore, you're still going to see double face cards. So, all of that stuff's coming back, but what did they bring new to the table? They brought Ascend. So I'm hoping that I get to actually get the key to the city occasionally and have a long game in there every once in a while.
Yeah, still the blessing of the city, right?
Is that what it's called? The city's blessing. Why do I keep saying key to the city?
Because it's a magic card and it's
Okay.
Look, as long as you don't do it by coverage, it's fine.
Oh dear God! Don't even say that. I'll totally do it. The key to the blessing. We've got 4 preview cards. So why don't we take a look at these? These are our exclusive limited resources preview cards. I put these up on the Patreon and the blog and stuff a couple of days ago when we had permission to do so, but they are interesting. They remind you of cards from the past. So they're called the Forerunners, and they all are uncommon. There's 4 of them that we have.
That's why they're called Forerunners.
FORE runner. And there's no blue one. But they all do the same thing. They search up a card of a certain tribe. They have you reveal it, of course, and then shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. So these cards do not have these cards go into your hand that they search up. So it's not a card advantage.
It's not card advantage. It's neutral.
No. It's neutral, but it is allowing you to draw potentially something great and set it up. And then on top of that, they all give you a bonus whenever one of those types of creatures enters the battlefield. So let's start off with Forerunner of the Coalition. This is the pirate version. It's 2 and a black for a 2/2 human pirate. So right away, the cost you're paying with this. You're getting a 3-mana 2/2, pretty unexciting. But when it enters the battlefield, you can search your library for a pirate, reveal it, and put it on top. And whenever another pirate enters the battlefield under your control, as long as you have the Forerunner down, each opponent loses 1 life.
Yeah, it looks like a pretty solid aggressive card, especially if you have good pirates. Like, obviously, if you have a hostage taker, this card's just bananas. But
yeah, turn 3 this, turn 4 hostage taker. By the way, you lose a life. I mean,
even without that, a 3-mana 2/2 that says ping your opponent for 1 when you play a pirate is a card I'd play in my aggressive pirates deck.
Yeah, it's fine, right? Especially, and of course, the more pirates you have, the better.
But the fact that, can you imagine playing this, getting another one, playing the second one, getting some random pirate, and you're draining for 2 for every pirate? So.
Oh God, yeah. Oh, you're like chaining them at this point? Yeah, that's pretty bad. All right, next one is Forerunner of the Empire. This is the dinosaur one, but it's a little interesting because it itself is actually a human soldier. It's 3 and a red for a 1/3. Ouch. But you can search up a dinosaur and put it on top. And whenever another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Forerunner of Empire deal 1 damage to each creature.
So it auto triggers Enrage. I mean, first of all, it's optional. You don't have to trigger it. But whenever you play an Enraged dino, this will ping that dino itself.
Yes.
So I think that's one of the more valuable things. It just means all your Enrage is on.
Yeah.
And it could have wiped the board of like little vampire tokens or 2/1 flying merfolk. Yeah. Also, you can stack up like maybe 2 dinos in the same turn and really just put a beating on things. And since this is a 1/3, it'll survive most of that. So seems solid in the right deck.
How much better do you think these are with a bomb? You know, like you mentioned.
Much, much better.
I mean, they're just like super better.
If you have Burning Sun's Avatar, Forerunner of the Empire is awesome. So
yeah, Regisaur Alpha, whatever.
Yeah.
Forerunner of the Heralds is the Merfolk version. It's 3 and a green for a 3/2 Merfolk Scout. And whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on the Forerunner.
Yeah, so it's a 4-mana 4/3 if you play the Merfolk immediately afterwards.
Yeah.
It works nicely with the +1/+1 counter synergy cards. Like imagine, searching up the Herald of Secret Streams.
Jeez,
yep.
Yeah, that's
playing this, attacking for 4 unblockable.
Oof. And it gets bigger. It's not getting smaller from there.
Cards seem quite good in their tribal decks. The Forerunner of the Empire needs a little more work than the Forerunner of Heralds or Coalition, but they all seem quite good. The Forerunner of the Legion is the last card. This is the Vampiric Tutor. This is a 2 and a white for a 2/2 Vampire Knight.
That's a stretch. Okay, yeah.
And it says, its bonus text is whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So I think this
seems like the weakest,
most anemic text.
Yeah.
But it is nice with lifelink and flyers, which Vampire Tribe has a good amount of. Totally. I imagine you'll be playing this. Plus, it gets your Anointed Deacon. The fact that Vampires has such an important card at common, and now that you only get 1 pack of Ixalan, you're going to be even scraping for those even more.
Totally.
Though we don't know everything that's in Rivals, of course. These cards all seem good. So.
Yeah, I think so too. Also, one thing about the Forerunner of the Legion is there's multiple cards, at least from Ixalan, that bring multiple vampires in at once.
This works with Queen's Commission and cards like that.
Yeah. So anyway, those are our preview cards for Rivals. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're pushing the tribal stuff still. That seems very, very much obvious based on these key uncommons in a small set. I mean, this is some prime real estate that they gave to these cards. So we know that part, but we don't know the speed of the format. We don't know what else. We don't know how the removal's gotten and all that. And of course, we'll be getting to that next week. All right, Luis, shall we call it a show?
We should.
Yeah, that was good. Thanks for that walk down memory lane. It has been a great 3 years, and God, I hope to keep you for another 3 because I really enjoy doing the show with you, man.
Well, I think I've got to sign off for you then.
I hate doing the show with you now all of a sudden. All right. Well, if you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can find everything related to the podcast. I mentioned the episodes on lrcast.com. There's an episodes tab and you just click over to that and boom, you're good to go. If you want to visit our sponsor, that's ChannelFireball.com. Make sure you check them out for all that awesome free content. And if you want to sell your cards back to them, you got a pile of rares sitting around. They're going to give you 30% bonus on trade-in, or you can even just get cash, whatever suits you. ChannelFireball.com. Make sure you check them out for everything you need. That is going to do it for the show this week. Next week, don't miss it. Rivals of Ixalan set review. We'll be here.
So, in the theme of the show, I decided that I would take a look at the sign-offs I like the most. And of course, I'm the arbiter and judge of this. The sign-off from number 278, this is the April Fool's episode because it was 4-1. So the 4 worst first picks I've ever made. And
that was a good one. I don't like April Fool's, but that was good.
I am proud to say that I don't think I've added to this list. Like no picks I've made. Nice. No picks I've made since then would displace any of the cards on this list.
Well, obviously you're not talking about your stream here, right? I mean,
no. We're talking about
professional level play. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Though my stream does feature professional level play.
Occasionally, yeah.
Number 297, or episode number 297, the sign up from there, I think was actually one of the more useful ones. It's getting value from your time and your money. This is
people love that one.
Trying to reframe how you think about time, how you think about money, and how you think about how you use those resources, because I think they're all very connected. Number 313 is it was almost by popular request. It was a guide on how to write puns and or make them. And I don't know if this increased the net good in the world, but I figured I'd throw that out there. And then number 315, it started a tradition. It was one of my favorite sign-offs. This is the Limmies, the Limited Resources.
The Limmies! Oh,
So,
yeah.
I would highly recommend you check out that one because the Limmies.
Are you going to do more Limmies at some point?
I did 2 years of Limmies. I will do. I don't think I did them this year.
No, you missed the Limmies. Well, you can still put them in wherever you.
All right. Well, we'll figure it out. So those are the sign-offs that I liked, and
right.
I will say that some of the sign-offs don't make it into the show notes, so I may have missed some sweet ones that I just don't remember at this point. But
Yeah, it's just hard for us to remember all those.
those are the four, and like I said, I hope for another 3 months, just like these last three.